Okay. We want to be mindful of everyone's time, so we'll go ahead and get started. I am Brianna Walker. I'm with the Union County Wildlife Chapter in Monroe, North Carolina. If you don't know about us, we're a pretty small chapter. I've been part of the chapter for about a year now, but things have been going well. We're pushing through, even through COVID, and we're really glad that we were able to reach out to a bigger group tonight, especially welcoming other chapters into our meeting. So the presentation tonight is on red wolves, and we have a panel of speakers, and those include Dr. Liz Rutledge, the NCWF's Director of Wildlife Resources, Dr. Ron Sutherland with Wildlands Network, Joe Madison, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service Red Wolf Recovery Program Manager, and Katarina Ramos, NCWF's Refuge Volunteer and Program Coordinator. So I would like to turn it over to Joe Madison to get us started.
Thank you. Let me get my presentation showing. Can you guys see that and hear me?
Yes.
There's a window blocking the, there we go. Okay. So as she said, obviously we're gonna talk about red wolves, and I've kind of have two presentations, one that's sort of on the ecology, biology, one that's on the management, and I've kind of tried to meld those together, so hopefully it's not too terribly long as we go through this. I've tried to incorporate as many pictures, and I try to use only pictures of wild red wolves. You know, a lot of the stuff I see out there, unfortunately, use captive red wolves, which are fine, but I try to use wild red wolves, and I try to use ones from visitors that have occurred within the last 2 or 3 years, because just let folks know that although it's extremely difficult, you can see these guys out there if you try harder. Try hard. This is the historic range map for the red wolf that throughout time, and you can see, I don't know if you can see my cursor, this little area here is where the current population is, and down here in southeast Texas, southwest Louisiana, is where they captured the last remaining red wolves in the wild back in the late 70s and declared extinction of the wild before the reintroduction in 1987. Just some general things about red wolves. They're a distinct species. You know, there's been some back and forth over the course of the management history of red wolves, but the National Academy of Sciences, as we believed, in 2019 came back saying yes, they are a distinct species, and they're not a mix between a coyote and a gray wolf or any other species. But from a size standpoint, they kind of do fit in between a gray wolf and a coyote. They're only endemic to the U.S., which is the only species of wolf endemic to one country. So we like to refer to them as American red wolf. From a Fish and Wildlife's official standpoint, it's listed as the red wolf, only not the American red wolf. But I do like the moniker of the American red wolf. They're also, unfortunately, the world's most endangered wolf. And I think I saw in Ron's, he said the world's most endangered tainted. So that's even a step more in the unfortunate category. And obviously, I personally and the folks that work on the red wolf recovery hope to change that at some point. There's currently about 250 red wolves in captivity as part of the captive breeding program, the Red Wolf Species Survival Program. There's 43 zoos and conservation centers that have red wolves, and this is the only photo that I'm stealing from Ron. The rest are from other sources. This is just a general size comparison. This is actually what we use on our hunter identification cards that we mail to folks that hunt out here to kind of show the difference. The coloration is not a good clue between the two because the color overlap. The only thing about color right now is we don't have like a black phase of red wolf currently, only because even though there was black wolves historically, the founder individuals that were used to start the captive breeding program did not have that trait. So we currently don't have any black red wolves. But wolves are generally larger, they're longer, they're taller, and they weigh a lot more as an adult. When you see them out there, we kind of like to say they look like they're on stilts because the legs are considerably taller, and you'll see some pictures throughout that kind of illustrate that. Obviously, there's variability between individuals, and Coyotes, their facial features are kind of more pointy. Their snout and their ears are kind of pointy and smaller. Definitely a smaller skull, morphologically, and those types of things. But there's definitely overlap, especially younger wolves. There could be overlap in size, but red wolves have much larger feet as well. And one thing you kind of notice in this picture is coyotes, generally speaking, their tail is a bit bushier, and it tends to go below the back knee, even looking like it's almost going to touch the ground. Whereas because of the long legs and less of a tail, in some instances, a red wolf one appears to be higher. Red wolves, people think of red wolves as packs, and I guess technically they are a pack, but they're not packs in the sense of you think of like gray wolves, where there's members coming and going, and there's battles for who's the alpha and that kind of thing that happens with gray wolves. Really, they're more of family groups. It's the breeding pair and their young of the year and the yearlings from the year before that help raise the young, and that's generally how it stays. And it's very rare that non-family members will join a pack. Obviously, two wolves from different family groups will join to become a breeding pair, but there's not members coming and going in packs like there are in other species of wolves. Average family group or pack size is 4 to 6. The Milltail pack on Alligator River, about 3 years ago, was 11 wolves. They had a large litter, and they had a lot of dispersals there for a brief time. There was 11 wolves, but the typical litter size is about 2 to 4 pups. For dispersal, most juveniles will disperse from their family group, in the 18 to 24 months range, sometimes a little later, and sometimes they don't disperse. It kind of depends on the food availability and the territory availability and the pack members. Like Milltail right now, we have 2 females. It's a mother and daughter, and because there's only 2 of them, the younger female's not as likely to leave. And this is just an example of kind of the size difference in a year between a wolf that dispersed from the Beach Ridge area onto Costa National Wildlife Refuge. She's a beautiful wolf, both when she was younger and now, and I'll show a brief video in a little bit of her as I get to it. Red wolves are habitat generalists, generally. There's not like a specific habitat they need or have to have. It's more based on prey availability and habitat secure enough to raise young in. So if those 2 things are there, then you could find red wolves there. When they first reintroduced wolves, and some of this is based on where they reintroduced them onto the refuge, but also I think these, they were animals that came from zoos. They tended to stay more in the wooded areas and for their denning and rearing, and they would use edges and some roadways for travel, but they stayed a lot more in the wooded areas. Now, over time, they've shifted. And the areas they use most of the refuge and off the refuge is the agriculture areas and the wood blocks along the edges, and anywhere where human density is relatively low. Home range size, it depends on prey availability. The higher the density of prey and availability of prey, the smaller their home range size. So in good habitat, meaning adequate prey base, they're 15 to 25 square miles, but in areas where there's less prey and considered marginal habitat, their home range sizes can be 50 to 60 square miles or larger even. It's all based mostly on prey density. From a prey standpoint, what they eat, they focus mostly on white-tailed deer, although there's individuals that tend to key in on different species, and they eat deer year-round, whereas coyotes may focus only on deer like in the springtime. They also prey on raccoons and nutria and rabbits and rodents, and very rarely livestock. People tend to think of wolves as being an issue for livestock, and granted there are lots and lots and lots of livestock around here, but in the 33 years of the program, there's only been 7 incidences of livestock depredation, and it's along the lines of livestock and pets, so it's barn cats and chickens and those types of things. And in almost every one of those 7 incidents, it was an injured or a really old wolf that was no longer able to catch their native prey species. This video I wanted to show red wolf interaction with a prey item, and I've titled it "Big Bad Wolf?" How bad wolves are, mean, aggressive wolves. That's one of the Milltail. That's the Milltail, the younger Milltail animal, who wanted no part of that possum. For mortality, unfortunately, human-caused mortality is the leading cause of mortality, primarily gunshot and vehicle strikes. And human-caused mortality has a significant impairment for breeding pairs, especially if it happens in the fall during hunting season, because it disrupts pack formation and it disrupts breeding pairs, and they don't have as much time to find a new mate, and it just disrupts things and can lead to more interbreeding and hybridization, unfortunately. The average mortality for an adult red wolf of natural causes in the wild is about 9 to 10 years, is what we typically see. But when you factor in the human-caused mortality, that lifespan gets significantly reduced to about 3 to 5 years. So it's a big issue from a population standpoint. Red wolves will displace or kill coyotes that are in their territory. Now, I'm not saying that if you have red wolves in an area that you'll have no coyotes, but generally speaking, the larger red wolf population you have, the less coyotes are in the area and will be staying in the area. And so we have documented over 60 instances where red wolves have killed or displaced coyotes, but we've not ever documented the reverse, where a coyote or a hybrid has displaced or killed a red wolf. And I don't know if the polls, though, I can't see if the poll is up, but this has to do with the...
I will launch it right now.
So this kind of gives the answer to the poll. I meant to ask the poll to be on at the beginning so folks could, before they saw the slide. Maybe I'll skip that slide and come back to it. This is the current range of the red wolf here. It's considered the North Carolina non-essential experimental population, which is under 10J, Section 10J of the Endangered Species Act. And it covers these 5 counties. And I'll point out that, although these Outer Banks area is part of Dare County, so technically it's within the NEP, there are no red wolves on the Outer Banks, either historically, well, I guess I shouldn't adamantly say historically, but there has been no documented red wolves in the Outer Banks. The population of red wolves here in eastern North Carolina was established 33 years ago when they released 4 pairs in 1987. The last adult red wolf to be released into the wild here in North Carolina was in 1999, and that's largely because they determined that it was more successful to do pup fostering, where they would take pups born in the zoos and put them into wild dens of pups about the same age, and the female wolf would and the family group would take them in as if they were their own, and the mortality percentage and all that was basically the same as any wild wolves. So that they kind of, after 1999, they stopped releasing adults into the wild, and they started going with the pup fostering. And unfortunately, we haven't been able to pup foster since 2013 either. So that's one of the factors that has led us to where we are today. And the red wolves out there in the landscape right now are the 5th generation of red wolves born in the wild since the reintroduction. There's currently a known population, meaning the ones that we have radio collared and actively tracked, of only 7 individuals here in eastern North Carolina, which we all know is substantially too low, and something we hope to change and tried to change last year, but I'll get to that. In addition to those 7, we also have some adults that radio collars just quit functioning because they're old. The radio collars, we've been able to set the settings on these radio collars. Some of them that last for 7 years, but the batteries have died. But we still believe they're out on the landscape. We've got 2 or 3 instances of that, so that adds to the population. And then there's bound to be some uncollared adult red wolves that we just don't know about, based on they're on private land that we don't have access to, or those types of things. But even factoring those in, we estimate that the population of wild red wolves in eastern North Carolina right now is probably less than 20. And that's down from a high in about 2006 timeframe of around 130 to 150 red wolves in the wild. And just as a reference point for that 7 radio collared wild red wolves, in 2011 there was 89 collared red wolves. Unfortunately, we haven't had any confirmed wild litters of red wolves in the last 2 years, which is the only 2 years since reintroduction that there were no wild wolves born in the wild. There is an outside chance that there was one born on private land, and it is private land we have access to, and we have collected scat samples in that area and sent them into our lab for genetic testing. So hopefully they'll come back as a red wolf pups, but we just don't know that yet. We do know of one hybrid litter this year and suspect a few others. And obviously, or of course, with this low of a population, it increases the chances for hybridization. Generally speaking, red wolves won't select coyotes as a mate if they have an alternative. If there's red wolves in the area, that they can find the appropriate mate. But when they can't find an appropriate mate, then they will choose a coyote mate over not breeding typically. And so at this low population, hybridization becomes more of an issue. If you have a healthy red wolf population, then you get some hybridization on the outskirts of the core of the population, but it's not as large of a factor as it is when your population is as low as we have right now. There's been 2 mortalities in 2020, and then they were both gunshot mortalities on private land. We currently do not have any known breeding pairs in the NEP, the North Carolina NEP, unless that genetic testing comes back to confirm that we do. But as of right now, we don't know of any breeding pairs, and we only have 2 areas right now where we know that there's multiple red wolves, and that's in the Pungo area of Pocosin Lakes National Wildlife Refuge and the Milltail Pack of Alligator River National Wildlife Refuge. And I call it the Milltail Pack, but it's, like I said, it's a mother and a daughter, so I'm not sure that would really truly be considered a pack. And that third possibility is in the Floyd area that we haven't determined yet. This is a map of the general area that shows you where they're at. And the ones with question marks are the ones that their collars have recently died, but we believe the animal is still out on the landscape. And even this map is a little bit outdated. That's from July. We've had a mortality since then. From a management standpoint, we typically do aerial monitoring flights once or twice a week, weather dependent, to find all of the collared red wolves. But because of coronavirus restrictions, we haven't been able to do that because we can't be in a plane with a pilot. We're not supposed to be in vehicles with each other, that type of thing. So we have been doing all of the telemetry from the ground, which we find all of the collared red wolves at least once a week. It's a lot more time. Takes a lot more time, but it can be done. And we're always monitoring. We have a lot of remote sensing cameras all over the place, and including on private land. We conduct trapping from November to mid-February to radio call individuals and monitor the population and the health of each individuals, and to translocate animals if we're going to try to create breeding pairs. Last winter, we caught 7 red wolves between the North Carolina population and St. Vincent National Wildlife Refuge, which I'll talk about in a second. We also captured 8 coyotes during those efforts, and we had those coyotes sterilized and we re-released them on the landscape. And the reason for that is if you have these coyotes sterilized and re-release them, then they'll hold their territory, so it won't allow other coyotes to move in, but they won't, obviously can't breed. So it keeps the coyote population a little lower and maintains that territory until hopefully red wolves can take it back over at some point. So we like to use that as a non-lethal management of coyotes. This slide about St. Vincent. St. Vincent was established as a Red Wolf Island propagation site in 1990. And basically, it's a place where we can have red wolf breeding in a wild experience in a natural environment. These are wild wolves, but it's kind of a little bit more of a controlled environment because it's an island. They don't typically swim off of it, but they have at times. But what it does is allows this breeding to occur, and then we can remove the pups, or when they're yearlings or age of dispersal, from St. Vincent and bring them up to North Carolina to supplement the population and help with genetic diversity. There's currently 5 red wolves on St. Vincent National Wildlife Refuge, 2 adults and 3 juveniles. So last year we translocated a male red wolf from St. Vincent to Alligator River. And he was put into a acclimation pen with a resident female from the Milltail pack. And then we also moved a wolf from Alligator River National Wildlife Refuge to Pocosin Lakes National Wildlife Refuge. And he spent time in a pen with a female from that area. Unfortunately, neither one of those pairs stayed together after release. So we were hoping to create 2 new breeding pairs, but neither of those stayed. Down in the Pungo area of Pocosin Lakes, that male and that female, their territories somewhat seem to overlap, but they're never actually right together. So we're hopeful at some point that they may return to being a pair. And that picture on the bottom is just the kind of a picture of the acclimation pen. This is the female in Pungo. Can everybody see these okay?
Yes, Joe.
Okay, all right. That's the female that lives in the Pungo area. She's the small one that had the large radio collar on that I talked about dispersing from the Beach Ridge area. She's a beautiful animal, and she is a feisty animal, which is awesome. She's an awesome red wolf. This is the male that was brought up from Florida, the dark colored one, and that's the resident female from the Milltail pack. She's 10 years old, and her teeth are almost gone, but she does a good job finding prey because she's a hefty one. This is the male being released into the wild. And we had Running Wild Media was there taking pictures. That's why you can see the video flashes and stuff. And you can see her still in the den. We basically just peeled back one side of the acclimation pen. You can see it in this photo. Allowed them to come out when they were ready. So that's his first steps in the wild here in North Carolina. We're currently doing similar type activities right now as we did last winter. Our hope is to move up to 3 wolves from St. Vincent up to the North Carolina NEP. We're hoping to bring 2 of them together that are not related, because one of them came from the zoo to St. Vincent last year. So we're hoping to bring them up as a pair and place them in an acclimation pen. We started all of this earlier this year, so we're hoping to get these wolves in hand a little bit earlier. So that we can put them in acclimation pens earlier and release them. And then we're also hoping to put the Milltail daughter in an acclimation pen with the younger male from St. Vincent. We already have built the acclimation pens, and we actually already have captured some of the wolves in St. Vincent, and we are starting capture operations here in North Carolina as well, with our goal of really trying to get some breeding pairs and some pups next spring to help with population numbers and with the genetic diversity. Also, from a management standpoint, we work closely with on the Albemarle Peninsula Collaborative Canid Conservation Team. We call it the AP3C, and it's the North Carolina Wildlife Resources Commission and U.S. Fish and Wildlife personnel, along with a representative from North Carolina Wildlife Federation, Liz, and someone from the North Carolina Department of Natural and Cultural Resources, Chris Lasher, who works at the North Carolina Zoo. And is the head of the captive breeding program for red wolves. And basically, it's, we work on all things canid management related here in the Albemarle Peninsula. And we're currently working on objectives for those 2 agencies and how we can work together on canid management. Since we have different missions, we have different objectives and goals, and we try to work jointly so that we can be successful. And we currently talking about things such as types of radio collars to use on these animals, be it VHF or GPS, and the sterilizations of coyotes, like I mentioned a bit ago. That was a whirlwind tour of the red wolf ecology and management. I can answer any questions that people might have.
Joe, just before getting to the questions, we do have the poll results. Are red wolves behaviorally different from the coyotes? And we got 5 yeses and 2 maybes.
Okay, so that reminds me, I need to go. Do we have time for me to go back and do that part?
Do it. Yep.
Okay. Except now I quit sharing, so now I got to go back and share again. I forgot. 5 yeses and 2 maybes. Is that what you said? Okay.
Yes, correct.
All right. Can you see my screen again?
Yes, you'll just have to bring it back to full screen.
Right. I just want to get to the right place first.
Makes sense.
Okay, so the answer is yes, they're most definitely very different behaviorally. And these are just some that, kind of come to the top of my head. Some of them are scientifically shown, and some of them are anecdotal of what we see. And Ron probably has some additional ones, and other folks have additional ones. But generally speaking, red wolves are part of a pack or that family group like I talked about, and coyotes are typically solitary, except during breeding season or if they have pups. But they don't typically form packs and stay in family groups beyond the raising of the pups. Red wolves occupy much more remote areas free of human disturbance they're shy and elusive. They don't like to enter areas with people. And coyotes, I think, as a lot of us know, they're adaptable to just about all levels of human disturbance, including urban areas. Chicago is the one that comes to my mind. They have a rather large population of coyotes, so they can pretty much thrive everywhere under a lot of different conditions, and red wolves are not able to do that. And there's overlap between their prey items, but they focus on different prey species. Coyotes prey much less on deer and more in the spring when it's the young of the year and that kind of thing. They don't really focus on deer at all. And anecdotally, it seems like coyote take more birds, whereas red wolves very rarely will take birds. So there's definitely some distinction there. And one of the ones that really stands out to us out in the field and what we see is, red wolves just, no pun intended, but they know they're the top dog. They unfortunately humans get in the way of that. But so, they kind of, even from their scats, you typically find a wolf scat in the middle of the road because they're just like walking down the middle of the road, taking their time like they own the place. Whereas coyotes, they're like skinking along the edges, and you find their scats more on the sides, and they, when you see a red wolf, they're not going to come towards you. But they're also typically not going to bolt. They may like meander off, but a lot of times they'll turn broadside and look at you, which is to a detriment to them because it makes it more easy for them to get shot, unfortunately. But a coyote, they just typically when they see you, they really bolt. So it's a very different behaviorally. And this is one set of videos, but this is kind of what I'm talking about. This is I believe that's the daughter. The younger one, beautiful animal. I mean, just look at that coat. And we put orange collars on the red wolves to try to distinguish them in the public and hunters. That's why she has an orange collar on. So, she sees the camera. She's like, okay, I own this place. And then this is a collared coyote, and you got to watch quick. Sees the camera, and then it's out of there. So that's in a nutshell is kind of what we see. I'll play that one again. That is a collared coyote, and you can see the size difference as well. See, it wants no part of that. That's the same camera, same location, about a month apart. So that's a very simple example of how behaviorally they are. Now I'm ready for questions.
Okay, we do have a few questions. The first one, is there evidence of red wolves breeding with coyotes recently?
Yes, we had at least one known hybrid litter this year, and we suspect at least 2 more, and there's honestly probably more than that out there. So yes, and that's a product of a low population of red wolves. I believe, and Ron could correct me on this, but when there was a healthy red wolf population, the amount of hybridization to red wolf litter was something like 4 to 1 or 5 to 1 or something like that. But the lower the red wolf population gets, the more hybridization you're going to have percentage wise.
All right. The next question. So coyotes are solitary. This person says that they have a pack living on their land. They howl and yip together when the freight train passes by at night, and sounds like a half a dozen or more. So there must be at least 4 of them. Is this because they are part wolf? They said they're in northern Pitt County.
No, and it's more, first of all, coyotes have smaller home range sizes, much smaller home range sizes, so you might have some more living in close proximity. And I don't want to say they never are in groups either. And it's also, it depends on the time of the year. If they have young of the year with them, you might hear multiples at a time. So, but the fact that there's more there does not mean that they have red wolf genes in them. And I'm not a coyote expert, so I'm just telling you what I see.
All right, I think that's all the questions for now.
Wow, that was way too easy.
Oh, wait, we have another one.
Policy, I'm used to like lots of policy questions, so I'm glad.
How do the hybrid breed impact your research?
Yeah, hybrids are an interesting one, and we have lots of discussions. The Fish and Wildlife Service doesn't even have an official definition of what a hybrid is, so and there is no official hybrid policy, so it's a sticky one for us. And on the one hand, when you have a healthy population, you don't really want hybrids on the landscape. You want full red wolves out there, but when we're at low population numbers, we start to question, do we want to remove a hybrid from the landscape? That animal has, 50, 60, 70% red wolf genes in it. If that's our only red wolf genes right now, do we really want to remove that from the landscape? So it's an ongoing discussion that we have internally a lot and with others. I've talked to Ron about it many times as well. So I don't have a clean answer for that, and it's something we struggle with as we go along.
All right, now more questions are coming in. So what's the biggest need for the continued recovery, especially from the public? Resources, volunteers?
Well, the biggest need is, not to get too much in the weeds on the policy, is that we really need a new 10J rule, which would allow us a little more. The management rule that we're under was written in 1995, before it was acknowledged that coyotes were even in North Carolina, and before it was acknowledged that pup fostering was a scientific method for increasing the population. So it's kind of outdated. So there's some things that, from a best available science standpoint, are good things to do that we're not currently allowed to do. So that's one of the biggest factors. And the other one, of course, is people. We need to find ways to limit human-caused mortality, both from a misidentification or purposeful illegal shooting and from vehicle strikes. And dispelling the rumors of that they're dangerous to people and they're eating all the wildlife, as Ron will talk about. And there's 3 myths. Anyway.
Can you tell us why the population dropped so much in recent years?
It's a number of factors, some of which I just alluded to. We're not allowed to do pup fostering right now because it's not specifically allowed by our management rule currently, and so that has stopped. There's been a severe increase in mortality since 2007 because of gunshot. Some of that because of the coyote hunting regulations that have kind of put red wolves at odds with private landowners that want to be able to manage coyotes on their land. And there's different rules for coyote hunting and management in these 5 counties where there's red wolves than there are the other 95 counties in North Carolina. So that's made the private landowners feel like red wolves management is infringing on their rights. So we lost some support of larger landowners out here where some of these red wolves reside. So it's it's kind of a number of factors that have kind of perfect storm sort of thing that's led to where we are.
I'll just ask one more, kind of 2 more, because I know we still have to hear from a couple more people. So in terms of hunting on private land, have you been able to determine if the recent mortality from hunters has been intentional or accidental? And a follow-up with that, is it possible to prosecute people who shoot these red wolves, or at least investigate the shootings?
Yeah, see, that's me saying I didn't get any tough questions. Now you give me some tough. If you're talking specific to the 2 mortalities this year, neither one of those was hunter related. So I just want to be clear on that. I'm not going to talk about the specifics of either one of those exact cases. That's a law enforcement thing to do, and I need to be careful what I say about the second part of that question as well. But I'll just say this: there has never been a prosecution of someone for killing a red wolf in North Carolina, and you can extrapolate from there whether that's a problem or not.
All right, great, thank you. I'm not sure who is up next. That's Liz or, okay.
Yeah, so I'll go ahead and go from here. And I keep seeing questions pop up in the chat box, so we'll try to address as many of those as we can at the end, so we make sure we have time for Ron too. So first of all, thank you all for joining us tonight. We are extremely pleased to have these professionals speaking with us tonight on this topic. And it's something that red wolves are very important to the Wildlife Federation, and this is conservation work that we've been involved in for quite some time on more of an advocacy standpoint. So we're really thrilled about that. We support red wolves because they are a predator and they do play a role in the ecosystem. And Joe alluded to some of that, talking about the prey base and everything. So they keep populations within their limits and are a very valuable species for us. And so I'm just going to talk to you guys a little bit about what the Wildlife Federation is currently doing for this species and how we go about our work. And we have a new project that we've rolled out with Fish and Wildlife Service. So I want to briefly introduce that to you guys. And then I also want to introduce our new staff member who's going to be working on this species. So first of all, I'll just start off with a little bit. As I said, you know, this is near and dear to the heart for the Federation, conservation of the species. And so we could not do this without partnerships, whether it's Fish and Wildlife Service, other NGOs, different groups. So we're currently actively working with the state agency and the federal agency, as Joe had mentioned, with the AP3C meeting group. So we want to be kind of a liaison and help integrate all of these partnerships and everything that everybody's trying to do for this species. So we're excited to continue to be part of that. And we've been working in other ways with our partnerships. And yes, I'll go ahead and talk a little bit about the program that we've rolled out with Fish and Wildlife Service. So some of you have probably seen our press release. It's called Pray for the Pack. And the intent with that is to have prey in the title. So pray for the species, being P-R-E-Y, meaning wildlife. So as Joe mentioned, prey species, rabbits, deer, raccoons, things like that. So when we get into stuff like that, we start talking about habitat and what we can do. So this program is primarily in the 5-county area where the Red Wolf Recovery Program is. And so we're looking for private landowners to get involved. So Joe's work covers public lands, which we're extremely grateful for. But as we know, wildlife, they're going to move around. And so the species does move around to private lands locally, and so we want to get these landowners involved from a perspective of habitat, making improvements on their property and what they can do to support this species. So with that being said, it's part of a cost share program, so private landowners can enroll in this particular program to do the habitat improvements. They can receive technical guidance and funding through the cost share program. So we're really excited about that. And part of the agreements there are, you know, they're designed to work on habitat, but they're also designed to build relationships locally. So part of this program that we're interested in doing is basically fostering support for this species in the local area where the reintroduction is occurring. And so there's been a lot of back and forth with private lands and landowners and over time. So we kind of want to build those relationships and mitigate some of that. So that's the work we're going to continue doing there, which will be focused on a lot of early successional habitat and possibly some other items depending on what landowners are interested in. So if you all know anyone who has property within that area and they may be interested in this program, we'd be more than happy to talk with them and see if they are possibly qualified for the cost share program. And so I mentioned that the Wildlife Federation is an advocate for this species. And so a lot of our advocacy work and everything comes through education. So we have, for the past, I guess it's been about 2 years now, we've had a staff person located at the Red Wolf Education Center in Columbia. And so we have been doing numerous educational programs and just having someone on the ground there, very involved, public interaction. So they reopened the education center to facilitate this, to let people stop by and come in. And so we've been a huge part of that and just educating the public on the species, the biology of the species, and why it's important. And so along with that, I'll just talk a little bit about that's where the wolf enclosures are in the area. And so the Wildlife Federation is actively working to get some cameras in the den areas down there. So we're hoping to engage the public by bringing that live so that people can actually log on and see the wolves, see their behavior within the dens, and kind of get a better feel for the species and kind of have a up close and personal encounter, but from your home. So we're really excited about that, and we hope to bring you more information and details as we get closer. Other things that we're doing, so this part of North Carolina is just we're very blessed to have all the different species in this part of North Carolina, whether it's tundra swans, black bear, deer. With the refuge system, it's just an amazing place. And so we are very invested in helping local communities with the tourism aspect related to this species. So the ability for people to go here and to hear wolves howling and to actually have the opportunity to get a glimpse of the species out and about. We're very interested in continuing that. And yeah, hopefully eventually we'll be able to do some sort of tour and have some sort of kind of interaction with the refuge system on that. So that's been very exciting for us. And yeah, so I guess my next thing I would like to introduce, I mentioned that we've had a staff person down at the Education Center for the last couple years. And so our previous person, Sarah, has moved on to another position, but I want to introduce Katarina tonight. So Katarina Ramos, she is our newest staff member. She's been with us, I think, 3 days now, Katarina? Something like that. So
I started on Monday.
started on Monday, so first week. So she is getting settled in down there, and we're very excited to have her. But she's going to be our on-the-ground person working with Joe, Fish and Wildlife Service, on our Pray for the Pack program, and she's going to be doing a lot of work at the Education Center. So if you're in the area and you're headed to the coast, stop by and see Katarina for sure. And yeah, we look forward to that. And if you have any questions, we'll take them at the end, but I want to make sure that we have time to get to Ron too, because I know he's got a wealth of just fantastic research that they've been doing through Wildlands Network. And so we're really happy to have him with us tonight. So I'll turn it over to you, Ron.
Cool. Thanks, Liz. This is great. And thanks, Joe, for the excellent introduction there of everything Red Wolf. Let me bring this up. Talk. Hello. Can you guys see that? Now, can you see that?
Yes.
Maybe?
Yeah.
Cool. Okay. Well, let's jump in. I really appreciate the chance to talk to you guys and the invitation to speak to the Union County chapter and all the, shout out to all the other partners and friends and colleagues that are on this call. Thanks for joining in as well. And I hope I don't goof up anything too bad. But I'd like to start with this quick video clip. And Joe alluded to this. This is from 2017, one of our videos. And this gives you a sense of what a healthy red wolf pack at the Milltail side of Alligator River actually looks like.
Hey, Ron.
It's Elite 6.
I don't think
Yes.
that we're seeing the video. If you just want to go into full screen so you can present from beginning at the top left on your screen, just so we could see the full
Oh, I
thing.
did. Darn it. What do you see?
I see the what we've tried science screen.
Really?
Yes.
Oh, that's interesting.
Okay. Well, if you at least want to click back to, I assume you want to start from the beginning of the PowerPoint. Is that correct?
Yeah, let me try one more time. Let me try.
Okay.
So right now you see what?
I see your full screen, so I can see the file home insert at the top, and I can see the slides as well, but they're a little bit smaller.
Okay. Let me try just sharing that window again.
Okay.
1 second. A window. Select window. Because that was not the slide I was on my screen, which is odd. Okay. How about now? Do you see the full?
I don't see the full thing, but I see the first slide.
That's so odd. Okay.
Well, we can at least see your slide. It's not as big, but we can still see it.
Okay.
So go for it. Thank you.
And does it change when I do that?
No, it's
No?
actually not.
That's
No,
so
it's not changing.
Interesting.
And you clicked a window, right? When you
Yeah.
were going into share. Yeah, someone suggested present online. If you want to click that and see, Ron, it won't hurt to try.
Which one is it?
There's a present online option. It's on the top. It's like the third from the left. Yeah, like under insert. Yeah.
Oh, up here.
Yeah.
Is it online?
Yeah. Let's see.
Yeah, I don't know.
Okay, well,
You guys can see.
I think there's just a lag.
Yeah, it might just be a bad lag. I don't know. Can you see it if I don't go into slideshow mode? Can you see this?
yes,
Now?
yes,
Yes.
we are definitely seeing it. It's not full screen, but we are seeing it, so that is wonderful. Yes, thank you, Ron. I'm sorry for any of the technical difficulties there.
No. Okay, well, let's see if we can see this video again. Can you see the video now if I start it briefly?
Yes.
Okay. So who knows why PowerPoint doesn't want to cooperate tonight, but with Google. But this is 6 wolves running by the camera. This is what a healthy red wolf pack would look like. And you can imagine back in 2006, 2007, that there were many such packs around the red wolf recovery area, about 150 wolves. Just, that was the goal of the recovery program all along, to see these animals back on the landscape. And I think we can get back there. So that's sort of what gives me hope, is having seen what the red wolves were supposed to look like. So let's see here. This is me. You can't see me very well. Ron Sutherland, Chief Scientist for Wildlands Network. We are a conservation nonprofit that's dedicated to rewilding, reconnecting, and restoring nature across North America. I'm based in Durham. I've been with the group about 10 years now. Actually, 10 years now. And red wolves are one of my favorite parts of my job. I've been working on them for quite some time. And I deleted most of the introduction from this presentation because I knew Joe would cover almost everything. But here's if you can see this, the red wolf population trend from 1987 to roughly today. Obviously, I need to update this. But it was a success story for sure. And it still is a success story in terms of what the Red Wolf program has inspired over the years. But if you look at where we are now, we're basically back to square one after just the last. Look how steep this decline is. Just the last few years, we've really lost this recovery program, and for many reasons that I won't go right into just yet. But I will. One of the core reasons that the Red Wolf started to get wiped out is that people started spreading this outrageous claim around, and that red wolves, along with coyotes, are causing the greatest wildlife disaster in the history of North Carolina. And those of us who are familiar with the history of North Carolina know that there's been several other wildlife disasters that probably exceed this introduction of red wolves. But it's also, it's outrageous, but it's led directly to, thanks to some hard work for some folks that really hate the wolves, this idea, this meme has spread, and it's got great market penetration in some areas. And the result is that the wolves have been, singled out and shot, and people have tried to wipe them out fairly successfully. But we've treated it since about 2015 as a testable hypothesis, and that we can go out there and do it. And this was based on me having been down there for years and having seen deer myself and everything else. So I knew that there was a good chance this was not true, but I wanted to test it. So we went down there in 2015. We got a nice grant and put out 20 wildlife cameras, 10 each at Alligator River and Pocosin Lakes National Wildlife Refuges. And some of those cameras we still are monitoring today. Different cameras, but in many cases the same tree. So we've had these cameras out for a long time, and the goal is just to evaluate the wildlife that's on these refuges where the wolves have been, and to show the public what it actually looks like, and to look for any evidence of a wildlife disaster, especially for the folks that can't be there in person. Those of you who have been to Alligator River, are probably laughing at the idea that there's a wildlife disaster going on down there. But anyways, what we've found is just an incredible, amazing wildlife spectacle that just has to be seen to be believed. And in the interest of promoting that, people seeing this, we've actually taken the unusual step, I think, of putting every single one of our animal pictures, no pictures of people or dog or cars or license plates or anything like that, but just the animal pictures, and putting them all on this Flickr site, Red Wolf Reality Flickr site. And I can share this with Liz and Tara and everybody else. But right now we have close to 200,000 pictures on this site, and representing dozens and dozens of camera sites. It's not just our refuge cameras now. We actually added in another set of 20-something private land cameras in the same area down in the Red Wolf area. So check it out. Each album on that site is a different camera, and so you get a sense of what's going on. And the cameras are spread out; they're not right next to each other. So that's our research. We've seen primarily we see a lot of bears. This area. If you haven't been down there, if you'd like to see a bear and you haven't seen a bear recently, you should go down to Alligator River. Our record so far is 42 bears in one day down there, and there's also some tremendously large black bears. We see a lot of cubs and everything, but these guys, the area is famous for having 600, 700 pound black bears, and we see bears in all of our cameras. Just incredible densities of black bears down there. There's tons of bobcats. And that's cool. We have some bobcats around the triangle, but down there, they're still quite a healthy population of bobcats. Lots of wolves. Not as many, perhaps, recently as we were seeing in 2015, 2016. Actually, the wolf population did seem higher, but we haven't run those numbers yet to know how it looks. But we're going to soon. And we do see deer. We see deer at all of our cameras. Every camera we put out. There's deer out there, and in some cases the deer populations, in some places the deer are quite thick. Like this is one of our cameras from the Pungo Lakes area that Joe was mentioning, where one of two remaining red wolf packs is hanging out. And here's just a few more deer pictures. I don't have time to show all the deer pictures, but there's a lot of deer down in that area. There's no shortage. There's still deer, every place you look, and that includes fawns. The fawns don't always get paraded out in the middle of the refuge. A lot of our cameras are on roads in the refuge because that's where the wolves like to hang out. And I think that 30 years on, the deer have learned not to parade their fawns out right in the middle of the wolf country. But if you go back into the refuge, you can find the fawns, and we have pictures of those. So you can check it out, the Flickr site. The other thing we've done, if you Google Red Wolves versus Deer Wildlands Network, you can find this Facebook video. If you're on Facebook, we made a video showing 3 years of photos from just one site, and this is it. This is within the Milltail Packs range at Alligator River, a place that's had wolves for 33 years, and it's about a 15-minute video. But in 15 minutes, you can see 3 years worth of pictures go by in pretty quick succession. it gives you a fair and accurate and balanced sense of what's actually out there. The short answer is mostly bears, but you do see wolves going by quite often, and you also see deer going by quite often. And so I think that's worth people taking a look at. So, and there's other lines of evidence that we can look at in terms of the impacts of the wolves on the deer. Really, nobody thinks, I don't think anybody's worried about the wild turkey population down there. Turkeys are doing fine. We see tons of wild turkeys and everything. But here's a graph I made of the deer harvest, and that's in red. That's the number of deer that were killed by hunters in each year. That's the red line, and then the blue line is the population of red wolves. And if you look at these two trends, what actually happened is the deer population was actually recovering in this area in the 70s and 80s, just like it was in many parts of the Southeast. A lot of people don't know that the deer weren't doing very well 100 years ago, but they've recovered since then. And so the wolves and the deer actually recovered together at the same time. They peaked together, and then the deer harvest did go down the last couple of years. I need to update this graph, of course, but at the same time the deer harvest was going down, the wolf population was plummeting. And so if the wolves were the ones that were causing the deer population to do something, it doesn't make any sense. And in fact, if you analyze this scientifically, there's actually a very strong positive correlation between wolves and the number of deer shot by hunters, and it's statistically significant. So the more red wolves on the landscape down there, the greater the number of deer were shot that year by hunters. It's just a fact. But what about coyotes? A lot of folks think maybe coyotes are taking up the slack if the wolves are disappearing. And then, as Joe mentioned, there's this frustration among landowners that the red wolf, maybe the red wolf's not so bad, but coyotes, man, they're this invasive species and they're wiping out everything. And so we need to be able to control the coyotes, and the red wolves are in the way. And that certainly has led to some of the animosity towards the coyote. And I've done some research into this, and we'll share a few of my thoughts on it. And this graph shows the deer harvest in North Carolina, and it needs to be updated, but I'll tell you what happens at the end here. But the red line is the deer harvest, number of deer. It's starting, again, as I mentioned, way back in the 70s, only 20,000 deer, and then getting way up close to 200,000 deer per year, in more recent years. And then I've drawn some blue lines on here showing, if you can see these, coyotes were showing up in random places at the coast. They were getting out of fox pens and things in the 80s. But they really started colonizing the mountains in the sort of late 80s, early 90s. And then they made it to the Alligator River area, and Joe can correct me on this, but somewhere within a few years of the start of the Red Wolf program. And it's actually fairly unfortunate because they thought they would have a decade or two before the coyotes got to Alligator River, because Alligator River didn't have coyotes when they started. But anyways, coyotes made it, and then coyotes were declared statewide in every county in North Carolina somewhere around the year 2000. That's that third blue line. And you can look at what happened to the deer harvest in the years after 2000. It kept going up. In fact, I think 2013 was actually the peak year. It's gone down some since then. But with coyotes present on the landscape, doing what coyotes do, the deer population went up. And, is this just unique to North Carolina? Well, no, actually. And if you look at other states, here's New York's deer harvest. Going all the way back to the 50s, they have more data available online for New York. And coyotes got to New York State. They came down from Canada, and they got there, if not in the 50s, actually more likely, I think, in the 1940s. And so coyotes have been up in New York for a really long time. Some of those, and some of those coyotes actually have red wolf, or not red wolf, but wolf DNA in them. The eastern coyotes are larger than our coyotes. But those guys have been out there for many decades. And what you see in terms of the recovery of the deer population in New York was the same long trend of more and more deer showing up, which is what we've seen all over the East Coast, and then stabilizing the last 10 or 15 years. And in fact, if you look at other states, you see the same pattern. And to me and to other colleagues, this seems like more evidence that what we're seeing across the East Coast is that the deer are finally hitting carrying capacity in many areas, and that the population is stabilizing. and that the arrival of coyotes, has been timed differently in different states. And Roland Kays and some of his grad students at the museum in Raleigh analyzed this, and they found no evidence that the arrival of coyotes actually led to any kind of decline in deer harvest population, or the number of deer being harvested. So it's not a question that coyotes don't eat fawns and things like that. They certainly do. But are they causing a wildlife disaster? It doesn't seem like it when you look at this graph. So that's my coyote and deer soapbox. But back to the Alligator River camera trapping. It's as I mentioned, it's one of the favorite parts of my job. It's just a supreme area for wildlife observation. We were down there in October and saw a pair of peregrine falcons flying around, the fastest birds in the world. We saw these deer basically almost ran us over. This buck was chasing this doe right at us. They came within about 10 feet of us before they turned around and ran off. Even some cool stuff. We open up our camera boxes and we never know what we're going to find. We found this scarlet king snake. In one of the boxes, we find lizards and frogs, lots and lots of squirrel tree frogs in our camera boxes. And so it's just a really neat place. I wish I had a chance to share all my photos from that area. But the last thing I wanted to do was share this new project we have underway. We've been doing field work down there for 5 years now. And every summer when we're down there, we're hearing quail call all over the place at the camera sites at Alligator River in particular. We hear them at Pocosin Lakes too, but especially Alligator River, the big fields there on the north end. And, it's good quail habitat, there's no denying it, but it led us to wonder, and I think some of the Red Wolf staff over the years have wondered this as well, could the presence of red wolves be promoting the survival of quail? And how would that work? Well, if the red wolf can help control or at least intimidate, create this landscape of fear for some of these, what we call mesopredators, like the raccoons. Joe's video of the red wolf being stood down by a possum is a little bit contradictory here, but possums do have a lot of teeth. But I know for a fact that red wolves do occasionally eat raccoons, and red wolves are larger than coyotes, and so they should have a better chance at controlling raccoon populations and making it harder for the raccoons and other mesopredators to go around and find quail nests, which they nest on the ground. And quail have been declining for decades across the southeast. They're a hugely important game species. There's entire groups of plantations all over the southern coastal plain where people are trying to raise quail for hunting, and it's beautiful habitat and everything, but they're having trouble. And one of the theories why they're having trouble, even when the habitat's there, is just that the mesopredators have hit too high of densities, and in part that's because you have human subsidies of these species, but it's also because they're missing any kind of top-down control by a top carnivore like the red wolf. And so we have set out to test that hypothesis as well. So we were this past summer we're doing quail surveys at all the sites where we have cameras, and the cameras pick up the red wolves and they pick up the raccoons and the possums and even a few feral cats now and then. And so we'll have data from the cameras on those species, and then we have the quail count data that we're taking from the same sites. And so we're going to be able to actually do the science and look at the impacts there. And if it does turn out that areas with more red wolves have less raccoons and more quail, all else being equal in terms of habitat, and we're trying to rest on that front, then that would be quite a boon for the red wolf, we think. So stay tuned about that. So in terms of conclusions, I hope I've at least given you the ammunition to go look for yourself at our data. We've shared all that data on our Flickr site and the Facebook video and other things. I'm happy to answer questions by email and things. I hope I've at least provided you some reasons to think that the red wolf is not causing a wildlife disaster in eastern North Carolina. I really don't think it is. It's just part of the native fauna. There's no denying that there are wolves in North Carolina at the time of European settlement. So all of our species have evolved in the presence of a top carnivore like the wolf, and they know what to do. They don't know what to do with other things like cars, but they know what to do with a wolf. They can survive. The wolf, however, doesn't seem to be able to survive human intolerance. We basically showed we could wipe out the wolf not just the red wolf, but the gray wolf as well across the United States. Unlike the coyote, we've never been able to eradicate coyote populations, but wolves, we've shown consistently that we can wipe out wolf populations, and we did, and we brought them back. But now, we're on the verge of losing the reintroduced population. As Joe mentioned, there's no red wolf pups born in 2019 or 2020. And the lower floor of the population is now 7 animals. And that, in terms of conservation biology, if you ask a conservation biologist, are you going to be able to rescue a population that's down to 7 animals and hasn't bred in the wild in 2 years, and that only lives, on average 3 or 4 years in the wild with human pressures? The answer is, it just doesn't sound good at all. So this population needs rescuing, and we're certainly hopeful that things are going to change very soon with the Fish and Wildlife Service, that they're going to be able to get the permissions they need to get more wolves on the ground quickly, to do the landowner outreach they need to do, to start enforcing the law in terms of shooting these critically endangered species, all those things. And so we know what needs to be done to save the species, but if we don't act very, very quickly, then this animal is going to become a ghost. 7 animals now that have, we lose 2 more, 4 more. There's just going to be 0 wolves in a couple of years out there. On the positive side, we've shown that with some level of tolerance, that we had in the 80s and 90s, most landowners down there were tolerating these wolves. The population could grow, and I think we could easily get back to that point. I think we can bring the red wolf back if we start releasing them again from captivity, and we do the things we need to do to build local support. And it shouldn't just be in North Carolina. There's other places around, but I always like to say that that it's going to be a lot easier to convince another state like Arkansas or West Virginia or Virginia, Missouri to take red wolves, or northern Florida, if North Carolina is looking more like a success story than it is right now. And so I really think we need to rescue the North Carolina population to set the stage for other states being willing to accept these animals. But I think our wildlife research showing that the wolves are not this big disaster for hunters out there, I think that's going to be critical for helping promote the idea of bringing this top carnivore back to other areas. So with that, I will stop there. But there's my email, and I'm happy to take questions with Liz and others. So thank you for listening.
All right, so if you guys have any questions, you can put them in the chat box. There was a little bit of discussion about the connection between red foxes and red wolves, and red foxes and coyotes. I think someone was saying since coyotes have shown up at their house, their red fox population has dropped. And there's research showing that when the red wolves are around, red fox populations are actually up. I don't know if y'all know anything about that or can speak to that.
I can start first. I will say that most of our refuge cameras, we don't get many foxes. And I don't know, again, it might be the same thing that's going on with the fawns, where the foxes aren't going to be out right where the wolves are at the same places along these roads. Some of our private land cameras actually do get a lot of foxes. And so that's promising. I think the red fox is a larger fox. It's ecologically, it's probably more similar to the coyote, and so it probably has the most to lose from coyotes, I would think. But in my own neighborhood here in Durham, we get both on a regular basis. We have red foxes and we have coyotes coming through. So. And the gray fox, there's actually some debate about whether red foxes are native to the Southeast. I'm not sure where that debate has ended up, but the gray fox is an excellent tree climber, and in theory, at least, should have no difficulties getting away from coyotes or red wolves for that matter. So.
Another really good question that was asked a little bit earlier is how to fight misconceptions regarding red wolves. I know that's a hard one.
Yeah, well, yeah, as Liz mentioned, and as Joe and other colleagues on the presentation here are doing, education is key. You can never do enough of it, it seems, but we have to get this information out there. The folks that spread the misinformation, they worked pretty darn hard at it, and so we need to be working the same the same level of enthusiasm and diligence to get facts and figures out there. But as we've seen with climate science and other things, there's kind of this dichotomy in the way that people get information, and it's sometimes easier to accept misinformation than it is to be to learn something new. And so we need to be exploring new ways of changing hearts and minds on wildlife issues, where people have already kind of had their well poisoned a bit. So.
And I just want to follow up with what Ron says. I'm in complete agreement with that. And as having advocacy as one of our main objectives, this education part has been huge for the Wildlife Federation, and for us to support Katarina's position down there on the coast and work with Fish and Wildlife Service with that. It's going to be huge to have those groups come through, and especially when you start educating children and stuff. There's no better place to start than when they're really young and kind of get that information out to folks. And then I think a big thing too, we're going to be trying to do a lot of positive relationship building. And so I think when you can build relationships over time and kind of, people begin to trust you, trust information and things like that, we hope to make some headway with that too. So, yeah.
I would like to add to that as well. We struggle. Obviously, we've had times of good outreach and education, and then times where it's not been good, and it kind of ebbs and flows. And we're trying to push that message out there and do various things like the film screening we did back in January and things like that. And as Liz said, we can't do enough. And we need to do more, and we need help with all of that as we're getting, and we need to do more ourselves beyond that. And we're doing some of it. We're updating the hunter ID card and things like that. We just redid our website, but I also, not everybody out here in Eastern North Carolina hates wolves. So it's actually a misconception along with the red wolf ones that everybody in Eastern North Carolina doesn't like. When they actually do the human dimensions surveys, we really have about a third of the people that love red wolves, a third of people that hate them, and a third of people are kind of neutral on it. But where we really lag in the public opinion is with the large private landowners, which is who we really need to depend on for red wolf survival, which is why programs such as Pray for the Pack are a key component of this, so we can start turning that piece of the social aspect around. And there's other pieces we need to do as well, but that's going to start small as we know, but we're hoping that once folks can see that there's value to having these red wolves here, and if we could get folks to just look at the science that Ron's talking about, that we tout all the time, and actually believe it, and then see that there's value that having these animals in landscape, and I hope that helps us turn the tide and get back to where we need to be with this thing. But it's going to be a difficult task, but one that I am, and we and all of us are more than have the passion and the drive to turn this thing back around and get us back to where we were.
I want to say one more thing too. I want to give a shout out to Joe and Ron, because something that I think it has an effect on all of us. Watching videos and seeing some of the photos of these wolves in the wild and in the field, there's nothing better to kind of introduce people to a species than those videos. I mean, they're fantastic. And if you guys weren't doing the work that you're doing, we wouldn't even have those to see. And I look forward to the Wildlife Federation being able to put up a camera and kind of capture a different aspect of the wolves too soon. And so bringing that to the public is just huge. But thank you guys for the camera work and all the videoing and stuff, because that's a lot of work. We see like a really short clip, but it takes hours to get that stuff together, but it's very, very powerful.
Thanks, Liz.
For sure. Thank you. And one of the one of the commenters made a note about looking at federal conservation dollars, like we thought about this, like the farm bill. The farm bill provides money for folks to do various conservation things, and if you could steer some of that large pot of money towards endangered species recovery, like for red wolves, that could quickly become another pathway of incentivizing people to want to have wolves on their property. And there's actually there's somewhat of a positive example there for the Louisiana black bear. Was an endangered, or at least threatened subspecies of black bear. Was found down there on the sort of the Gulf Coast in the lower Mississippi Valley. And Louisiana, turns out, didn't want to have a threatened species of black bear. They wanted to recover it. And so they worked with the federal government. They created this system where landowners that were within this sort of recovery corridor for Louisiana black bears would actually get they would get extra points in their applications for wetland reserve program dollars and other farm bill programs. And they actually maxed out the farm bill programs in every county, or at least most of the counties in that black bear corridor. And they got all these hundreds of landowners involved. And they restored all this great forest for the bears, and they declared in the end, the bear population started to recover. They connected the populations, and it's just worked out really well. And so that sort of thing, we think, could sort of scale up the level of incentive packages that are available for landowners in that area. And many of them are already quite familiar with the NRCS Farm Bill efforts, so it would be pretty smooth.
Yeah, that'd be great. I also saw a question on there. Somebody was questioning or understanding that these wolves are considered a non-essential experimental population, and I mean, I hate that moniker, but that's an official term, and basically what it refers to is saying that because there's a secure and viable captive population, that in theory, if this population was lost, we wouldn't lose the species. We would still have the ability to reintroduce this species somewhere else. So while I don't necessarily agree with that definition and that term, that's an official designation, and they technically do fit that description for a non-essential population. Also, kind of something to what Ron just said, we are just at the beginning stages of starting to redo the recovery plan for red wolves, which looks at the range-wide recovery of red wolves, and as part of that, stakeholders such as Ron and Liz and private landowners and state wildlife agency folks will be involved in the development of that over the next. We're scheduled to get it done by February of 2023, and as part of that, we will be evaluating other potential reintroduction sites within the historic range of red wolves. Now, where those will be and how that will proceed after that, I can't even begin to say, but it is part of the process that we're starting now. Now that doesn't change. That's different than a management rules specific to the North Carolina population, but it certainly will help feed information into a new management plan if that doesn't come out first. But
well, thank you all so much for being a part of this call tonight. Thank you to the Union County Wildlife Chapter for being the host of the program. Thank you, Liz, Joe, Ron, for being on here and speaking, and for all the great questions. If anyone has any other questions that didn't get answered or just want to discuss it more, you can send me an email at tara@ncwf.org, TARA@ncwf.org, and I will get your question over to the proper person. Thank you all so much. It was wonderful seeing you all, and I will send this video over in just a few days after we have it all set and edited.
Thanks for the opportunity.
Yeah, thank you all.